What up, everyone? It's your favorite Brooklyn boy, Anthony Carano, coming to you live with Cafe Meets Coaches. This will be a podcast centered around physical education for the masses. We'll go over a range of different topics such as movement science, fitness planning, and how movement plays a role in the development of mind, body, and spirit. My goal is to bridge the gap between academia and practice, helping friends, colleagues, and future professionals with the motivation to move and the knowledge to do so efficiently. Like the title suggests, some of the episodes will be recorded in person at a cafe. They might be at a fitness center, they might be on Zoom. If it's in person, you might hear some background noise in the podcast. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. All right, so I got Higashi with me here today. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Before I do anything, before we do intros, I actually start with one of these fun cards here. So it's actually a casual kind of conversation card. So you get to pick one out.
Yeah.
And it's a little personal, but you can answer whichever one you want.
Oh boy. Complete the sentence. I've never in my life been so angry as when.
You got 3 there. You get to choose which one you want.
Oh, okay. What is your worst memory with an animal? How long should people be together before they get married? Oh, these are all pretty interesting questions. I got to take these on my first dates. You know what I mean?
You still dating? Hold on. Let the world know now.
Oh no, I'm still dating. I'm seeing someone now, but
okay.
I have a baby mama situation. I have a 5-year-old daughter.
Okay.
But I'm getting myself out there again, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty good. Which one should I just answer? Any?
Yeah, whichever one you want.
Yeah, I think how long people should be together before they get married. You know, I don't think there's a set time. You know, sometimes when you meet someone, you know, right? Yeah. Sometimes like you're at that time in your life where you're like, all right, this is the time. You know what I mean? So I don't think there's a standard time. You know, maybe at least like 2 to 3 months is kind of minimum.
Yeah.
You know?
Nowadays, everyone waits till later and later anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. You know what I mean? Where you are in life, how long you've known that person. But I think when you know, you just kind of know, right? I mean, I like to think that way.
Yeah,
you know?
I would like to think too, but neither of us are married, so.
Yeah. That's right. You have a point there.
How old's your daughter?
She's 5.
5,
yeah,
okay.
She's 5. Yeah,
I didn't even know you had a daughter.
Yeah, man, she's doing great.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, your judo background, education. I know I met you at Brooklyn College, but yeah.
All right, yeah, so, you know, I grew up doing judo my whole life. That's something people know me for. You know, I'm a judo guy. My father came from Japan to spread judo. It was a huge global initiative to spread judo in the 60s. And in 1963, my father moved over to the United States to spread judo. That's all he's done his whole life, martial arts, right? So obviously, I get bred into this thing, you know? So I'm doing it since I was maybe 3 or 4 years old. That's my whole identity, all throughout my childhood. I wrestled in high school and college. My education, you know, I have a master's in teaching. I have an MBA also. And, you know, I was an adjunct professor at Brooklyn College. That's where I met you, right? When I was teaching some courses over there. And now I own 2 judo schools in the city. And, you know, I have a couple of real estate properties that are sort of my side business kind of thing.
Right.
I have a couple of Airbnbs, long-term rentals, things like that.
What are the names of your judo schools so they could Google it?
Yeah, Kukushi Budo Institute, it's on the Upper West Side, and Kano Martial Arts in Chelsea.
Okay, yeah. And I'll put everything, obviously.
Yeah, cool.
You know, but, yeah. So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't cut me off. Yeah, so that's it, man. I'm doing a lot of judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling. I'm sort of a grappling martial artist. You know, I boxed a little bit, done Muay Thai, dabbled in that. I've done karate for a very long time at my father's school, which is here. So yeah, you name it. If it's martial arts related, I've done it, you know?
Yeah.
I haven't really delved too deep in like the weapon stuff, shooting guns and things like that. You know, we're in New York City also. So,
right.
You know, right? You don't have access to a handgun.
Right, exactly.
If I was upstate New York somewhere, then yeah, I'd probably be a gun guy too. You know what I
Right.
mean? But like in New York City, you're just not.
Right.
Know? So
Yeah.
that's just how it is.
So you did karate too?
Yeah.
So your father brought judo and karate. Was the school always doing karate, or that came later on?
So he came as a judo purist.
Okay.
But there was a huge global initiative to spread martial arts, not just judo. So there was a Japanese karate instructor, you know, the Sato guy, Nakamura.
Sure.
And who was
sure.
the other dude? There's another guy. Masayama.
Masayama,
Yeah, so all those guys are long-term New York karate guys.
Right.
And they all knew each other, obviously, because they're Japanese, they're in the United States, they're in New York, of all places, right? So they kind of had, like, sort of a group, you know? Just like how the best judo guys now know the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys and vice versa in the United States.
Right.
It was very similar in that way. and they would trade lessons.
Right.
You know, those guys would come do judo here at my father's school. My dad would go over there and learn karate over there.
Right.
So they did that for years.
Right.
And once my father became proficient enough, he started teaching karate in his dojo as well.
Right.
You know?
So we both have, one of the things that intrigued me about you is somewhat of a similar background growing up in the martial arts.
Yeah.
And Japanese martial arts in particular, karate, jiu-jitsu, judo. I know, you know, seeing my father's instruction and then what I do over the years, one of the questions I had for you was about the evolution of teaching.
Yeah.
So like how, if your father came to watch you today, would there be something that pisses him off?
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
We changed the times. It's not what it used to be, right? It's different. Yeah. You know what I mean? People rolling in late. You know, we start at 7 o'clock, but I'm very, very relaxed with that kind of stuff because everyone has a career. You know what I mean? People do this as a hobby. You know what I mean? Back in the day, my father had a different mentality. Hey, martial arts, you're choosing martial arts, you're choosing to live a way of life. You're going to be here, you're going to be here on time.
Right.
Guy comes in late, don't get on the mat. You have to bow and you have to ask permission. All these kinds of formalities back in the day are acceptable.
Right.
But now, it's kind of a different life. You know, you work at a company or whatever it is and you got to stay late, you can't make it on time. You're not going to just come in and train at all now, just because you're going to be 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late.
Right.
Right? So those kinds of things have changed a little bit. So like those things might bother him a little bit. You know, judo guy wearing a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gi, things like that. You know, wearing like these cool patches and fancy patches. That's it's sort of almost a fashion statement sometimes, right? And those kinds of things, you know, the purest martial artist is like, hey, white gi, no markings, you're on time. You know, if you're not here 10 minutes early, you're late. That kind of a mentality. But you know, we're not in, 1960s Japan anymore. You know what I mean? It's a different time. And even with the teaching methodologies, like there's been so much research and negative reinforcement doesn't work as well as like a randomized positive reinforcement sort of structure when you're giving feedback. You know, there's a way to give constructive criticism. All these different things, there's a lot of research behind it, so you adjust with the times, right? So pedagogically, definitely much more different than, what we used to do it. But I think all these things are good things, you know?
Yeah, my father would often say I'm more Okinawan style. Now, I don't know how accurate, my father didn't grow up in Japan or Okinawa, but, this is all based on stories, but supposedly Okinawa was a little bit more relaxed about, like, the time. It was like, oh, yeah, we're just training all day, come in and train. Where Japan, it's military style, like you said, we start on time. And he'd say, oh, you'd be good for Okinawan, karate. And technically, karate is Okinawan regardless, but meaning, just that style of the two. So what about, like, you said training methodology and, is there anything technical-wise that has changed? Like, I know judo changes over the years as well. Technique, fitness, like things in that realm.
Yeah, I mean, now that there's so much money in the IJF and on the international, you don't see it so much here in the United States because judo's not that big of a sport, right? But globally, it's massive. And if you look at countries like Russia, where they have, Gazprom, which is their version of ExxonMobil, putting money in the sport, in France, and they have these massive sponsorships and, these super athletes, right? When there's money in the sport, you're going to gain the best athletes. You know what I mean? So physicality becomes much more of a factor. It didn't used to be 30, 40 years ago. Right? And with the advancements of performance enhancement drugs, these kinds of things make itself into sport when physicality is a big factor. You know what I mean? So all these different things kind of changes, the thing. And also even right now with the medium of being able to like have a conversation with you now, so many people can watch it and learn from it. Different time, right? You could get some of the best martial artists in the world, in these interviews and like really pick their brain and listen in. Before you were limited to the four walls that you were in the dojo. If you want to seek out that person's instruction, you have to go there. Now you can buy a DVD or whatever it is online. And you kind of study their techniques, study, all the stuff, and you kind of synthesize it and kind of make it your own. So the technique is different, the physicality is different.
Yeah, I know.
All the stuff that's been sort of like, can cause misconception in martial arts too, right? The stuff that can be done behind closed doors and, like best faith things, now can be easily outed, right? People could see it. And then, the comment section kind of, there's a reason that, that exists as well, right? So there's like a sort of a group populist validation thing happening online as well, right? So, you can't get away with shitty martial arts as much anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it takes one person to whip out a phone.
Yeah.
And you're exposed.
Yeah.
Right? So it forces you to be better, I think.
Yeah.
You know?
Is the Instagram, I don't remember what it's called, but it's something like just posts on all fake martial arts.
Oh yeah, McDojo Life.
McDojo, yeah. I don't know if you, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I send friends things on that all the time.
Yeah. The guy who runs is very cool too.
Yeah.
He's a jiu-jitsu guy, I think, in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know you're also not a historian, and I don't know how versed you are. By the way, are you born here or Japan?
I was born here.
Yeah. That'd be my assumption if your father came here, but I don't know what age he had you or what age he was.
Yeah.
Like I don't, you know, I'm sure you're not a historian, but like just a general overview of the history of judo or what judo is or where it came from.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could speak to that.
Yeah, so Japanese jiu-jitsu was the father of most martial arts, right? That's what, if you trace the lineage back, Japanese jiu-jitsu was a thing way back in the day, and judo comes from Japanese jiu-jitsu.
Right.
This guy, Jigoro Kano, he was actually a visionary. Right? And he had a huge hand in like ending isolationism in Japan, and you know he was an advocate for the Olympics, and he was like very, very involved politically, and it was his own vision about judo, right? So he took a lot of the traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu stuff, sifted out all the striking things, and made a sport kind of. It's actually a martial art, right, at the time, but like made this thing called judo, right, which is something that you could train full speed. Because up until then, most of the training was cooperative, right? If you look at karate training, even boxing too, people have this idea like, oh, if you box, you must be a savage killer and you just always punch each other in the face. Not true. 90% of the people you go to a regular boxing gym, they don't spar, you know? And most of the training is, you know, shadow boxing, hitting pads, hitting bag, heavy bag. Yes, you box and spar, but you're not going hard all the time. You can't take those shots to the head repeatedly every single day. How many times do you get blasted in the face every day?
Right.
You just simply cannot, right? So he kind of devised this thing of like, all right, you know, we're going to find a way to train to make each other better, you know, this philosophy-based thing, right? Where you can kind of go hard every day, you know, and it was kind of like wrestling almost, you know? And I can't remember exactly what year it was, but, you know, it took a life of its own. You know what I mean? It's
it really
massive,
did, worldwide.
Yeah, and then, you know, I think he was responsible initially for the white and the black belt, and then the color belts. Is when he decided to go spread it. People needed these sort of intermittent markers to show progress, right? And then the belt color system came, and Kano had a direct hand in, you know, creating that sort of thing. Right? When someone says like, "Oh, he was a black belt in chess or black belt in whatever," there's an origin story behind it, and you know, usually it can be traced back to. I think initially it was like a French guy who adopted judo from one of Kano's disciples with the whole card system. But Kano was the original guy that was like, all right, white belt, training, gets dirty, and then you could just tell the level of proficiency of a guy in the room. Everyone's wearing a white belt, but like how soiled their white belt was. And then became the birth of white belt, black belt.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's kind of a cool story, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you think, I know some martial artists have said things like, or had some fears of turning martial art into a sport because it could lose some of its essence. Yeah. I see the balance of both. I see the beauty of both. Yeah. Curious, do you think that, you know, maybe judo has taken away some of, you know, the original, you know, the origins of jiu-jitsu? Or standing Japanese jiu-jitsu, which you don't see very often nowadays. You know, you don't see kotegaishi, which is wrist lock. You don't see that often. You know, are some of those things lost? Is it worth it? What's your opinion on making martial arts a sport?
I mean, I think they should coexist. You know, when I teach something, there's a martial element to it, right? It's martial arts still. And then the sportification of martial arts is actually good for martial arts too, because you can spread it to the mass. Most people can do it, you know, in this rule set, right? And like the IJF is a great example. They're making all these different rule sets of like what you can grip, what not you cannot do. You know, like leg grabs, for example, right? It's a huge hot button item, but they do it for a reason because they want to keep the action going. You know, if any rule set that says like, all right, if I'm going to fight you and you don't want to fight if you run away, or vice versa, right? If you want to pick a fight with me, I don't want to engage in combat. There is no fucking takedown or technique, whatever it
Right.
If I run away and I'm fasting, you're not going to catch me.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's designed in a way, even martial arts, where two people have to engage in some sort of rule set, right? Like, hey, we're going to engage in this thing. So where does that line get drawn? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
How much this government that oversees all this stuff, like how much are they going to manipulate the rules to make sure that these two people engage in a way that's spectator friendly? It's good for the sport eventually. That's going to bring money and more eyeballs to this game, right? So they should coexist, really. Not forgetting all the origin stuff, not forgetting all the conceptual, philosophical stuff that comes with it, like mutual welfare and benefit, all these different things that are embedded. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think the argument they're like, oh, you can't do this in judo tournament, that's stupid, then it's not really martial art. Oh, this wouldn't work in a freaking street fight. It's like that person that's kind of saying those things, they're buffoons to begin with.
Right.
It's like they don't know enough to be asking the right questions. They're asking the wrong questions with very little information.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So a lot of this stuff that we do in martial arts is a training tool. No one walks like that. No shit, no one walks like this.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you can't do it on a cooperating body within a certain, restricted amount of responses.
Yeah.
What if the guy pulls out a gun? All right, that's a whole other story. You call the police. You know what I mean? Like those arguments just don't hold any water.
Yeah.
So I know I kind of took like a really roundabout way, but I think they should coexist, really.
Yeah.
Not forget the origins, and sportification I think is ultimately good.
Yeah.
Because those highlight reels that you see on Instagram,
Right.
Judo Gallery has 1.3 million followers, and now it's bleeding into wrestling. Wrestling's bleeding into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and people are doing Sambo watching this stuff.
Right.
MMA guys adopt it. It's mixed martial arts. That's what it stands for, right?
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate sportification. Even the person in turtle, right? If you're doing MMA and the guy is not allowed to punch him in the back of the head because you're optic nerves, you go blind. You get damage to the back of the head, right? So it's like, oh, you can't punch in the back of the head. That's bullshit. In a street fight, I'll do that. It's like that.
Right.
All right, go fight McGregor then.
See what happens.
Yeah, see what happens.
Yeah.
So they both have to coexist, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I've always felt the same way. I think sport also teaches you that grit. It teaches you the social emotional piece, how to get in front of someone and be nervous and still perform. Because there's also those classic videos of I don't know, there's some guy who's probably on the Mick Dojo where he's doing something, the guy just slaps him in the head 5 times and he's like, sorry, I'm second time I bumped the wall today. But I definitely think each sport has its limitations, of course, but it also teaches a tool. Same thing in training. They're all tools to teach something.
Yeah, and the mentality piece is the biggest one. You know what I mean? Even if you're playing soccer and you're gassed, and then there's 10 minutes on the clock, and you're fucking exhausted, but if you score this goal, competing under that pressure, and then pushing through your fatigue, that does something to your mind in a positive way. That's gonna lead to bigger and better things. Now put that in a martial context where it's like, all right, you gotta escape from bottom. The guy's holding you down against your will.
Right.
Tired? Do you just freaking give up, or do you keep fighting off your back? You know what I mean? Those pieces really help you develop as a human.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which kind of leads into the question, and you're kind of answering it already, but sport in general, and your expertise is judo, but someone who's just looking to get in good shape and good health, is it a good tool for them? Yeah. And it sounds like
I mean, of course. You know what I mean? If you go in and progressive overload, there's so much research on this, right? And even with something like lifting, you have to you can't just go in and try to bench as heavy as possible, right? So if you learn the sport and you progressively increase the intensity, you could have more fun and you could work out. It doesn't feel like a workout, all these different things, right? Play a piece. And can you do this to get in shape? Absolutely. But can you also get injured and now all of a sudden you can't work out at all and can you be in worse shape? That could also potentially happen too.
Right.
So you got to pick the right schools. You got to know your body, know yourself, and progressively increase intensity.
Right.
Like all things.
Should somebody, I guess you'd have to find a non-competitive school, or maybe more like Aikido style. Should someone do more old school? I mean, you could get hurt anywhere at anything.
You can get hurt anywhere. I think even in a competitive school, competitive, non-competitive, what does that really mean? Even my dojo here, it's like the majority of the guys don't compete.
Right.
why are you trying to compete is the question.
Right.
You know, sometimes it's like, I want to pressure test myself, and I want to grow a spine, and some people like this. Some people it's just kind of proves to themselves. Some people like having goals, period. But the risks are much higher. So you got to kind of ask yourself why you're going to do it in the first place. That's first and foremost. You know what I mean? You don't have to compete. Even being in a dojo, if everyone's competing in a dojo, you're going to have a certain feel in the room. You know what I mean? I think first and foremost, if you're a guy that wants to get in shape and you want to enter into martial arts, you have to feel safe in the environment. So you have to visit, you have to see what the culture of the room is like. If people are cranking on arm bars and such, right? And it's usually a top-down thing, the culture of the room, right? Culture of the gym. So having a conversation, an honest conversation with the person who's in charge and how they make you feel is a good indicator of whether or not the place is right for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So shifting gears slightly, martial art mindset a bit, or strategy. You competed on a very high level, right? So
Relatively
actually,
high. Relatively high.
Relatively high. I mean, national. Tell me a little bit about. I know I've read your bio, but you could say it better than me.
Yeah, I mean, I was all state in wrestling. I won 2 national championships in judo. I won a bunch of World Cup medals.
Yeah.
I made it to the World Championships of the United States. You get 2 guys per weight class.
So relatively in what world? That's pretty high to me.
Yeah, I was 43rd in the world, but there's some things that I missed out on. I missed out on being an Olympian.
Okay.
I missed out on winning a world level medal.
Okay.
Not like a World Cup, but like a World Championship, Olympic medal. I missed out on those guys. I wrestled in college. I was all state there too.
Right.
So like not the very best of the best,
right,
but pretty high enough.
Yeah.
To where like by anyone's standard to do this stuff, like that guy's proficient.
Right. You're still talking about like the top 1% of judo, like people in the world.
1% of 1% of 1%. That's what I'm,
I
would have liked to got there.
Yeah. But competitively, you've also trained a lot of people, a lot of local competitions and things in that realm. But, just thinking about your mindset with competing, how do you prep for competition? And mostly mentally, I guess. Obviously we can talk about technique too, but I think the mental component has more carryover because people can use it in any sport they want.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it depends. You know what I mean? There's guys who are naturally overconfident,
right?
Who don't have the skill set to support it, but they're going in there comfortably and saying, "Yo, I'm the fucking best."
Right.
There's guys like that.
Right.
And there's guys who can't go in there comfortably and confidently, even though they've done the proper preparation. Right? People who are just not naturally confident. Everyone's a little bit different. So I think it's hard to say this is the way to prepare mentally. I know for myself, if I'm not really training hard, it's hard for me to go in there with the mindset of like, hey, I'm fully prepared. So I will be much more nervous and anxious. I'll look for ways to kind of justify my losses if I'm not training properly. You know what I mean? So like for me, what I'm doing to prepare for a competition, the bulk of the training determines how I feel going into it, and then ultimately like how I perform later on, right?
Yeah.
So
training hard.
Training hard, really, yeah. So I think bulk of the preparation happens there.
Nervous before competition?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. But you get better at it.
Yeah.
You get better at channeling it. You develop certain rituals. Like for me, I would do sort of like a pre-match ritual where I would warm up a certain way. It's almost always the same, right? And I sort of developed this thing where it's like, all right, I do this, and then I'm prepared to be in the zone, really, right? And then this is the best version of myself that I can be in this time. And then so now when I would go out there, right, I know without a doubt that that's the best version of me ever doing the sport. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear that for
sure.
But
it's sensitive too. You know what I mean? Like if I'm nursing a knee injury and I'm like, oh shit, man, am I gonna blow my ACL up today? It hurts so much. Like, should I have gotten a cortisone injection before I came out here? Like those things kind of weigh on your mind.
Right.
And then being able to push that out, and let your body just warm up and go for it. That's a skill in itself.
Right.
There's a lot of different factors kind of playing into this.
Yeah. I did a post recently where, because every once in a while I'll dabble in competition still. I did a local karate competition.
Nice.
But it's a good reminder of like how I prep and things. And I often think about it like I'm putting on a show, and I know this sounds weird at first, but more than competing. Because what I do then is I transfer, I shift my mindset away from all the other things that could make me nervous and more so on things I can control. Because when I'm putting on a show, it's me against myself. And those are like those typical, quotes that you hear, the real battles against oneself, or the opponent is an illusion, or, things in that realm. But it actually helps to shift the attention to things that are in my control. So I say, I'm going to get out there and put on a show. And if that's the case, I have to conquer my fear. I have to conquer my anxiety, whatever it is. I have to be able to relax, but also be heightened enough that I'm not sleeping on the mat. It's a perfect balance of engage but not too engaged. And that shift of a mindset actually helped me to perform better. And
it's good.
So I think, just picking people's brains and understanding what do they think about before they get in the ring, or all that stuff is valuable.
Man, everyone's different. Everyone has their own ways about it. I knew a guy that was just overly friendly, joking around the whole time, and he's nervous, but that's just the way he deals with it.
Right.
I know guys that are like, don't talk to me. They're sitting in the back with the headphones on, listening to music and whatnot. Guys like that. And it's guys that need to warm up really, really hard to kind of like pump their heart up enough to make it overshadow the fact that their heart's pumping because they're anxious. Now their heart's pumping because they're warming up and their body's warm. See what I mean? So like everyone's a little bit different. You kind of have to pick and choose and find your own way. For me, preparation took a huge portion of how I felt going in.
When you're in the ring, right? So I notice most anxieties before, then once you're in there, you're in there. But do you have any offensive or defensive strategies? Are you kind of an aggressor? Do you go in hot and, attack, make a move? Curious. I don't want to spill any. If you're still competing.
I'm not really competing. A lot of that stuff was refined over time. In the beginning, it was like just go out there, put your hands on, just kind of rip and go and all that stuff. But little by little, the older I got, the more I understood the game. You know what I mean? And, you take the first minute or so to kind of catch your bearings, right? You're trying to out-grip them. You're collecting data a little bit too. You put yourself in dominant position, you see what moves they have. And then in that time, as you're trying to figure out what moves they do, looking for weaknesses in their game, obviously, right? And then maybe you force 1 or 2 penalties. That's sort of a generalized strategy. Because you get 3 penalties in judo, you're out, right? So like gaining a lead in that way where you're forcing penalties, whether it's like, spamming feints almost, and letting the people back up a little bit and then maybe playing the edges and shoving them out of bounds kind of. So that could force a penalty, right? Maybe you're a little bit more active than the opposition. And then they get a stalling penalty. They're not attacking. You know what I mean? So I haven't really made any effort to take them down yet. But during that time period, in that first minute, I've already sort of forced 2 penalties, kind of, right? And now the attacks that they do, because I'm attacking from dominant position, I kind of can log it, right? And even before, like you're going into this, you kind of already know what the other person does now with the internet and everything. They do a little bit of tape study and film study and all this stuff. And then eventually it's like, all right, this is the plan, and you go for it. Right? You execute it. That's kind of the way I like to take things. But, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes you go out there and you just get slammed right off the rip. Sometimes this guy's so strong, you're like, holy shit, how am I going to, take this guy down? Like, I can't get good positioning on this guy. And now it becomes a game of like, all right, I got to, now you're not even worried about inbounds, out of bounds. Maybe you get forced to penalty. Now you might be down by penalties. You stepped out of bounds.
Right.
Or even like someone's about to launch you. So you bail out and transition to the ground, and you do a shitty attack, and now all of a sudden you get in a penalty there too, right? So a lot of these things can kind of take you off your main game. For instance, if I'm going against a Russian guy who has a Russian judo style, they like to go chest to chest. They have a very lifting, heavy attacking system. The game is generally going to be not getting to there because they know that position better than me. So their game is going to be forcing that position. My game is to stay away from that position. And how well can we do either of those things? That's a lot of where the battle's won.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then in that time period, if he's forcing that position and I'm backing out, that's a penalty on me. Because I'm not engaging and trying to take the person down. If I could keep him at arm's length, prevent it, and then be active and actively work his feet and try to take him down, now all of a sudden he's trying to close the distance, but I'm tipping him, messing with his balance. He's going to be inactive. He's going to get a penalty. You see what I mean? So all these like little strategies, like now it's not the traditional sense of like, oh, attack right and go left or do these moves. It's not really like that. There's sort of these micro battles to be won even within the overall context of the game. You know, and figuring that out is a big piece of it.
Right.
You know?
So you're strategizing in the middle of the round, would you say, at times?
A little bit, you know, and sometimes you have a good coach that could kind of like, and you kind of have like, that's the thing with having a good coach, right? They could say like, hey, don't let him get that, you know, don't get chest to chest with him.
Right.
They might say. And in judo now, it's like you could only coach in between when the time's not going.
Right.
It's like tennis.
Right.
They steal a lot of the infrastructure from tennis. Like the world ranking list, the Grand Slams, the Grand Prix. All their tournament ranking structure comes from international tennis.
Right.
And a lot of their rules, also with coaching, they brought from tennis too. Like when they're playing back and forth, you don't hear coaches screaming at them, right? You don't see that. When the ball goes out of bounds or something like that, then you could hear the coaches giving their advice and the athletes looking over. And judo's kind of doing that similar thing, right? So if you look over at your coach and he goes, yo, he wants to get chest to chest, he wants to go, don't let him get that. Okay, got it, bang.
Right.
That's the game, right?
Right.
And then if you trust your coach,
Right.
you know what I mean?
You play. Right.
Yeah.
So hopefully they're more of the mind than you are.
Yeah, sometimes, depending on
Right.
your coaches. You
Right,
know?
right.
You get my father in the chair, he's freaking yelling and insulting me. Why are you so fucking weak? What's the fucking matter with you? You know, you get that kind of thing. And sometimes it's like not helpful.
That's
but
funny.
if you know your athlete too, right?
Yeah.
And if you know your athlete just needs motivation,
Right.
or he just for instance, like for me, the biggest strength of my father as a coach is I look over and my pops is sitting in the chair. You know what I mean?
that-
And he's fighting
yeah.
the battle with me.
Yeah,
Does
that's
he
cool.
know more judo than me? You know, that's like, you know, he knows a lot of judo from back in the day.
Right,
But
right.
the new
But
modern
the
stuff, he's
game's
not gonna know
changed.
this shit.
Right.
So it's like for me to look to him for technical insight that I'm not seeing, I can't really ask him for that at a certain level.
Right.
You know, did he compete in the Olympics during this era?
Right.
No.
Right.
Different.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, having him just being there yelling at me and just like seeing that he's in the match with me is just enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I get that.
So like those kinds of things really change, and knowing your athlete, knowing your coach.
Yeah.
I can't even remember the original question. Just like
I don't either. We're flowing at this point.
Yeah.
We're doing verbal judo.
Yeah.
My father's favorite line to me was just stop fucking around.
Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah,
like
okay, yeah.
that did it.
Yeah.
That did it for me.
Yeah,
You know? I was just saying, stop fucking around
Yeah.
and do what you came. Do what we practiced. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I guess that was
Okay.
good advice.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of genius, right? Because if you're training every day and you're doing certain things every day, it's working in the room. Theoretically, it should work there too. Just
Right.
go do it, right? Maybe, you know,
Yeah.
maybe that's what you need to hear.
Oh, I love it. When
Yeah.
he says that, it fires me up.
Yeah.
For sure. Like my father says, stop fucking around. Like I'm not. Now I'm a
Yeah.
killer. I'm
Yeah.
ready to go.
And maybe that little extra edge in intensity is what you need for the person to retreat a little bit, and now you've gained an upper hand, maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you mentioned weaknesses. What might be some weaknesses you're looking for in an opponent? So like if you're,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're technical. You can mention technical
yeah.
too, but yeah.
So if they're only turning to one side, if they're attacking too much, like for instance, like tennis, like this guy has a weak backhand, you try to put the ball over there. Right? Similarly, judo, like if the person's right side, he's turning this direction, he has no weak-sided attacks. Right? I could be a little bit more comfortable defending that dominant side a little bit more, right? With more conviction. You know? Or if he's going for a weak side attack, it's not very good. I guess it's a weak side, like let's just say like a sasai or something. I know it's coming. That's not very good. I can wait for it and counter it. Right? He's turn and throw, weak side sasai. Turn, throw, weak side sasai. I feel like it's coming. As he's going, I'll time like an ochi or something, inside trip or something like that. Those aren't really like weaknesses, right? Even like gripping. You know, if I can outgrip the guy consistently, I don't have to go out there and slam him. He'll make his own errors. Because if I control the sleeve, pull his head down, he's going to go for a shitty turn throw, and I can just stuff it. Force penalty, stuff it, force penalty. Stuff it, attack ground, burn some time. The other guy probably has 2 penalties down. He has no good attacks, you know, then he's cooked. He's getting tired. Sometimes gas tank is a weakness,
Mm.
you know? And if you're in good dominant position the whole time, you're cranking on his head and he's always playing defense, that's very exhausting.
Mm.
You know, and then you can kind of work his gas tank a little bit more. Every time we drop to the floor and then we're about to engage in groundwork, as opposed to actively trying to strangle and armbar them, just putting hooks in, putting hip pressure and attacking his neck, that's going to work his tank, right? So now he gets up, he's a little bit more tired, he's breathing harder, you can pull down his head a little bit more. Now you're just kind of working him, just cooking him. And now he's going to make bigger mistakes down the line, and he's not going to be as offensive, and that's when you freaking full court press. So like that may be a potential weakness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So slightly shifting gears a little bit, and I don't know how versed you are in some of the Zen pieces of the martial arts. So like Zanshin and Mushin, or some of those fun ones. You know, some people are more or less versed, but like for example, you made me think, you know, one that I struggle with, Mushin, no mind, right? So getting in the ring and not as, you know, I'm not focused necessarily on anything particular and I'm flowing. And then I asked the question earlier, but are you being strategic during the round? Like, am I having mind or am I not having mind? But some of those old, you know, Zen principles or practices or whatever you call them, do you use them in your training, or would you say that's more your father, maybe old school stuff nowadays, or
I think if you're competing, I think if you're competing at a high level, you know, most of these guys have a very niche strategy, right?
Right.
Their game is very limited. Not limited, but they do a handful of stuff extremely well. You know what I mean? So whenever you're going against someone, you're always trying to funnel everybody into this system.
Right.
Like, I don't want to get too specific like Ono.
Right.
You know what I mean? He has his positional advantages and he has his attack sequences there. And even if he loses the gripping positions, he has his attacks from weak side. Right? When he's like being dominated, he has 3 or 4 attacks from there. Generally, it's like a spinning away Uchimata Tomonage, and he has a really forceful Osoto. But he changes these things so together, right? So a guy like that, everything is automated, nothing is new, everything is following this system where you're funneling everything down this huge funnel. And all the different positions, he knows exactly what to do at all times because there's no variation, right? Then I think you could get really in a place of like, no mind, you just go in there and do it. You know, but if you're kind of taking the approach the way I was explaining, like looking for weaknesses, playing different games, strategy, all this stuff, then you need to have some, you know, conscious activity happening, I think, you know? And why can't it be both? You know what I mean? Grip fighting, positioning, some of the reflexive stuff, like stepping out of a Uchimata or something like this, those things can be naturally just done, right? That's no mind because I've trained enough for it. But you have to always save a little bit of your mindset, a little bit of this stuff to, you know, look at the overall picture, to be tuned in with your coach. How can you be tuned into what your coach is saying if you're no mind? You know what I mean? If you have a good coach, like if you're going against a guy with an Olympic level coach and they have a good relationship, they've been working together for 25 years or something, they know each other so well, you're not only just fighting the athlete. Sometimes you're fighting the coach, and the athlete's the mere vehicle of that guy's mind. You know what I mean? In that case, you get outnumbered, 2 versus 1.
Right.
You know, in that case, you need to have a little bit of faculty to be able to work with your coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this whole no mind stuff, does it work in the samurai era of like a guy has a sword and no mind's great because you're dead. If you make a mistake, you're dead. The consequences are really high.
Right.
Judo, it's like, yeah, you get slammed, not that big of a deal. It's like, all right, fucking lost the game.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think it plays more of a role when you're talking about like real martial arts from back in the day, the origins. Not real martial arts.
Right.
But the origination of all this, where it was life and death.
Right.
And you know, people make this thing like, oh, those days were great. No, they were not.
Right.
It's like, life or death, this and that. I mean, shut up.
Right.
You can't even, you know what I mean?
Make
like,
it to work on time.
Yeah, exactly. You know? So it's like, what are you talking about? You know, it's kind of silliness a little bit.
We glorify things in our mind sometimes, and that when it comes to reality, it's like, I don't know about
why
that.
Why are you talking about like perfection and life or death and dying for your thing? You're not even in shape. You can't even get in the gym, Tyson.
Right.
What are you talking about? Right?
Yeah.
Judo's not real because it doesn't work. So I was like, all right, bro.
Right. So one of the things about judo is, or jiu-jitsu, using an opponent's energy against them, or having it where a smaller opponent could beat a larger opponent.
Yeah.
A lot of these old guys, Gichin Funakoshi in karate, Kano, like they weren't big guys.
No.
They were able to take in a disadvantageous situation and make it advantageous.
Yeah.
And so how does that happen in judo? Like I know a big thing could be leverage, or like how does the little guy beat the big guy? Is it,
I mean, you leverage, timing.
Yeah.
With bipeds, we walk on 2 feet.
Right.
You knock their feet out from underneath them. A lot of guys aren't very good at, fighting off a double leg takedown and such.
Right.
Because they're not trained. It's trained and untrained, right?
Right.
So having that skill set to defeat bigger guys, but there's always a limit to this size thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the classic adage is like, you can do all the martial arts you want, man. You go against a gorilla.
Yeah,
You're not gonna take them down. You're not taking a gorilla down. You know what I mean? They're 300% stronger than you. They outweigh you by 400 pounds.
Yeah.
They have the same limbs as we do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
You can knock a gorilla out.
I'd like to say yes, but no. You're not knocking a gorilla
It's tough.
out. But
like,
you're not knocking a gorilla out.
Let's say you miss and he grabs your hand.
I
You're
can't
gonna
imagine.
crush your hand.
Even if you cracked him as hard as you could, I can't imagine knocking him out. You
Yeah.
think? Or you think you
mean,
can knock a
No,
gorilla?
I don't know what their brains. Who knows what their physiology is like. But
Right.
if you miss and they grab your wrist, there's no wrist escape, dude. They're crushing your wrist. Your wrist is broken.
Yeah.
You ever see that video of the gorilla grab a kid or a human and they just pull and the shoulder just fucking comes out of its socket, dude? Is there any technique to that? No.
Yeah.
They literally just grab you and rip it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's always limitations to stuff. I think it gets lost, and I'm the small guy, I'm the weak guy. It's like, all right, get as big as possible.
Right.
Get as strong as possible.
Yeah.
Athleticism,
It is a tool.
yeah, you got to learn how to be athletic with your body. You got to learn your body as a tool, and then
So what's the, I guess, I don't want to hit you too hard of a question, but the science of a throw.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can briefly touch on that, or the 3 steps, or if someone was a brand new beginner and you wanted to explain what a throw is or how it's done, or how they utilize leverage. So are you trying to get below the person's center of gravity and pull from above their center of gravity?
Yeah. So theoretically, it's longer the lever arm, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking about moving, and then you want to create a fulcrum.
Right.
So it's lever arm, fulcrum, wedges, all these different things kind of play a role in taking down the person. If I have an underhook and I have a nice wedge under your armpit and you don't control that space, that's a lot easier for me to all bounce you forward, because the lever arm is pretty high, and if I go for taitoshi and I'm clipping you down by the ankle, the lever arm is very long, right? Fulcrum's here, there's a wedge under your armpit, and then I could use leverage to take you over.
So the lower the fulcrum and the higher the effort arm, or the higher the pull, the better, would you say?
I mean, generally, there's a lot. So the lower the fulcrum, the easier it is to step over it as well. You know what I mean? So
Good point.
loading your base, taking your center of gravity and pulling it over my center of gravity. And now if I have my knees bent, I can elevate and lift you physically off the ground. Right now, there's no contact you have with the ground, so now it's a lot easier to rotate you in there, right? So that kind of a thing. If you're looking at a huge ripping society with a lot of turning movement, centripetal force, is that right? One of those guys?
Yeah.
Those things kind of come into play. And physicality is a big one. You could actually physically pull the person forward and then drop underneath them. Or if they're running at you, you just drop underneath.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So those kinds of mechanics kind of play a huge role in, takedowns.
So what does your training look like nowadays? You still training judo, or are you doing BJJ? Do you lift? Do you run?
Yeah.
What do you do for your exercise?
So I try to get in the gym 2 or 3 times a week. In an ideal week, I'm in the gym 3 days a week, right? And doing sort of a full body workout,
Right.
If I'm a little bit more diligent about it, it would be a push-pull legs kind of a split.
Okay.
I'd probably be in the gym a little bit more, maybe 4 or 5 times a week. But right now I'm lifting 3 times a week. I go to jiu-jitsu every day, Monday through Friday. I do a train in the morning. They have a 10 a.m. and an 11 a.m. comp.
Wow.
So I do a 10 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Okay.
sort of a thing. And Wednesdays I come in here and work out with Glick. It's my jiu-jitsu guy. I do judo with them. We work out. So 5 days a week I do my morning workouts. You know, whether it's most of the time it's grappling, and then I try to fit in my lifting. You know, sometimes I'll do like a Tuesday jiu-jitsu session in the morning, and then I'll go lift weights, pick up my daughter from school, and then I kind of just hang out with her the rest of the day.
Yeah. I like to hear it, especially as a parent.
Yeah.
I mentioned in my last episode and the one before that, Mike Boyle, big strength coach.
Oh yeah.
I had him on.
Nice.
But you know, he was mentioning to me like, oh yeah, all your stuff sounds great because you know, you're not married and you don't have kids. But when you have kids, it becomes difficult.
Oh yeah.
But so I like to ask the question. What do people do? The first person I had on, a lady from physical literacy, you know, she did speak to the difficulties of like having a kid and still exercise. It's not easy.
So difficult. Yeah.
You know, but it's nice to see you make it work.
Yeah, lucky for me, you know, when the kid's in school,
Right.
you know, I don't have a 9 to 5.
Right.
Right, and I treat the whole training portion of my just me training.
Right.
I treat that like an actual job.
Right.
I mean, I love it, so it's not really a job.
Right.
I don't feel like it's a job, but it's a big portion of what I do, and I wouldn't sacrifice that for, you know, anything really.
Right.
So like I do that, and then when I come teach the judo at night, I work out with my guys too. And generally it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sometimes if I'm banged up, I just won't work out in the evening, and I'll just teach. And sometimes it's actually better for the students because I'm more attentive, right? And I can actually watch with intent of giving them feedback as opposed to me getting a workout and kicking the shit out of them.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So sometimes it's kind of better.
Right.
You know, but with my schedule, it's kind of perfect because I drop my kid off at school, and then sometimes I go straight to the gym and then go to jiu-jitsu, or sometimes I go to jiu-jitsu and then go straight to the gym. And then by the time my workouts are wrapped up, you know, I gotta go pick her up.
Yeah.
So I go pick my daughter up, and you know, most of my training is done. You know,
Right.
all the emails and all the admin stuff, those always take a back seat
Right.
to my actual training because, you know.
Right. So you prioritize it.
Oh, absolutely, man, without a doubt. You know,
Yeah.
and even when I did have like more of a corporate type job, you know, in the past, or when I was working on my MBA, whatever it was, when I had, you know, try to get a workout in before or after my general thing. But it's usually my first thing that I always kind of make sure it gets done on my to-do list. It's number one, training.
And why?
Just feeling good, man. You know, I don't feel good about myself when I'm fat. You know,
Right.
not fat, but like, you know, like when I'm out of shape.
Right.
Right, going up the stairs, and I let myself go every now and then.
Okay.
You know,
We're
when I
all
have like,
human.
injuries, things like that. My diet gets away from me. It's a little bit sloppy. I don't feel good about myself. I'm not, you know, my energy levels are lower.
Right.
So, just feeling good about myself. You know, I have that mindset of like, if I'm not doing what I can to be better, I don't feel good about myself. Period.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Maybe you know,
Yeah.
self-esteem thing. I don't freaking know.
No,
but
no,
like,
for sure. I mean, there's
Yeah.
mind-body connection without a doubt.
Yeah.
So all this stuff is deeply intertwined. I know myself, if I don't exercise, I don't lift, I don't do something, I feel it right away.
Oh yeah.
And,
yeah.
You know, so it's a big part of my life, and
Yeah.
you know, part of some of the podcasts too. Different episodes target different things, but some of them target a little bit more about the benefits of exercise too.
Yeah.
So, you know, part of the podcast is really to help people to prioritize movement and be inspired too.
Yes.
You know, when you realize how important it is and how it impacts your life.
Yeah.
But so, lifelong journey for you of movement. So, I'm just curious, as someone who's been a mover your whole life, has it changed? So, like, did you have to do different types of exercises? Did you stick with pretty much judo your whole life? Like, I know for me, having some variety helped.
Yes.
I also probably
Yeah.
have borderline ADHD on top of it. You know, most
Yeah.
like physical education people
Yeah.
to some degree.
Yeah.
But it's helped me to maintain movement because that variety
Yeah.
gives me the spice I need. So yeah, like your journey of movement, what has helped you to keep you on track, I guess?
You know, like when someone's trying to take you down, slam on your head, you know, it's, you're forced to move, and you kind of forget that you're actually working out as well.
Right.
You know, but I love sort of like everything related to fitness. You know, so you know, lifting all the time, running all the time, and stuff. Like you just said, variety is the spice of life, right? I've gotten into ballet.
Oh, wow.
For 2 years straight, I was like really, really into it for a little while. Right before the kid was born, you know, I was obsessed with it. Went to ballet like every single day, 2 classes a day. You know, I've probably done easily 100 classes that year. 100 100 hours easily.
Wow. What made you choose ballet?
You know, man, I had a back injury. I used to deadlift pretty heavy. I was deadlifting maybe like 565. I was trying to get to 600 on the deadlift. And I threw my back out a few times. You know, sometimes it was like, all right, let me do a drop set and cool down set. I'm going to do 185 for as many as I can after I did my heavy volume set. And then, you know, tweaked it. Right? Or doing judo and like landed funny and then kind of pushing through it. And then, you know, when you throw out your back, you're like fucking crippled for days at a time.
Yeah.
And that happened quite a few times sequentially over the course of like a year. And then, you know, people were telling me you should go to yoga, and I tried it. I just like couldn't get into yoga, man. It was just so boring for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was walking by this dance studio and everyone was stretching, and I was like, you know what? That could be fun. Right? It's like all these pretty girls in this. They're stretching. They look nimble.
Right.
Those guys all look super nimble.
Right.
And you know, I like consume it, right? Like sometimes I go watch a ballet with a girlfriend or something, and they look, you know, they're not jacked or anything like that, but like they're good athletes or they're mobile.
Right.
It's like, you know what? I need that mobility because I was never flexible or mobile.
Right.
You know, and working on my mobility on my own is not only getting me so far. So I went in and I freaking loved it.
Wow.
You know? Loved it. Did it. Obsessed with it for like 2 years.
That's actually super cool. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
a nice
freaking awesome.
balance
Yeah.
of yin and yang a bit there.
Yeah.
Or maybe even not. I don't know that much about ballet to speak to it as if it's yin and yang, but it seems to me like judo and ballet is a nice balance.
I mean, ballet I think is a great balance for all sports.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's very mobility based. It's a lot of isometric contractions. You know, balance is a huge factor, knowing your body. And you do everything you do to the right, you do to the left evenly.
Right.
So, all right, we're getting on the bar, left hand on the bar, right? And then you're doing every exercise with this side of the body. All right, let's turn it, do it to the other side. You know what I mean? So you really feel all your imbalances. And you're forcing your body to make a certain shape. And on one side of the body you can, on the other side of the body you cannot. There's an imbalance there. You know, what do they say? Like the two most reasons people get injured, imbalances and, you know, not properly progressing in terms of overload and stimulus, going too hard too soon, right? And, you know, that imbalance that's really sheds the light on that, you know?
Right.
So, but yeah, the variety is a big portion of it, you know? Little by little, the older I get, the more injuries I accumulate. The different things I have to do, so I'm forced to do different things.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I think I hit the bulk of my questions here. And is there any, I don't know, final, any things you wanted to touch on or any, not that you had to have them, just before we close out, I don't want to give you an opportunity. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of physical education, you know, I think finding the right coach, I think, is one of the biggest things.
Right.
You know, if I look back to all the people who've taught me anything, really, there were like Martin Rooney. I don't know if you know Martin Rooney.
Sure. Yeah.
So Martin Rooney was one of my guys that had me early on, and he really inspired me about physical education.
Yeah. Nice.
You know,
Yeah.
and there's a perception when your initial contact with sports is gym teacher.
Yeah.
And if you have a goon of a gym teacher that's kind of like, you know, like that's what you associate physical education with, you know, and when you really look into it, like a true physical educator is something very special.
Yeah.
You know, and so you gotta go out there and seek it out. Your very local gym teacher may be great, may not be great. Chances are they're not gonna be that amazing.
Right. No, you're right. You're
You know,
right.
if you look at the
I agree
average,
with it,
yeah, right? So like, you know, seek out great mentors, seek out great coaches, and I think once you do, you pick a sport or any kind of physical activity that kind of resonates with you, and then you can take it from there, and you know, sky's the limit, really. And make your whole life better.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how I like to approach martial arts. So it's a tool to make your life better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So go do that, you know?
Yeah, so go
Not
do
you,
that.
but like, yeah.
So, all right, brother. Thank you for having on. Well, thank you for being on. You know, it's been awesome. Like I said, I've been following you for a while. I took your class at Brooklyn College. I got to come and train here.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the best, if not the best. I don't know of anyone better in New York City. You know, no offense if anyone's listening. I don't know, but I don't know anyone better in New York City. You know, I look on YouTube, you put in judo, you're the first guy that comes up.
Yeah.
So you're as cool as it gets when it comes to judo. Been following you for a while. Anybody who asks me if I know a good judo school in the city, I always say,
Yeah, thanks,
Higashi's the man.
Appreciate it.
So, thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Yep,
And
thanks, man.
we'll get to be on the mat again soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right, brother.
That was easy.
Yeah, nice and